Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And the 2043 season gets underway today as we try to finally guide these A's to a repeat World Series championship. Won 120 games last season and the world title. And we are projected to be the top team in baseball this year, despite the fact that two members of our starting rotation, new addition Macho Rangel and crafty veteran Doug Weiss, are both going to be missing some time here at the start of the season. Hopefully we can still get off to a good start here in 2043 before those two are ready to go. For those who are wondering, Steve Genus, the top pitcher in baseball over the last decade with 7 Cy Young Awards. I don't really think that that's arguable, although Mike Ramsey's got a boatload of Cy Young Awards too in the National League. But certainly one of the top pitchers in baseball, final year of a 6-year, $333 million contract. He remains on the trade block from the Texas Rangers. Don't know that we can actually afford him, even if we get creative. Also, don't know that they'll trade him to us in the division. But right now, really doesn't matter because he's still exercising his 10-5 rights, but someone that we'll continue to keep an eye on as this season moves along. Taking a look at our schedule here for the month of April. Start off with the divisional series at Houston, but then we don't play again in the division till we're home against Houston in the middle of the month. And then we've also got games on the road at the Angels and home against Texas in the division. So no games against Seattle here in April of 2043, but we will be facing all of the other teams in our division over the first month of the season. And our A's are off to a very strong 4-0 start this year. Swept that first series on the road in Houston. Minor league system has regressed a bit. We rank only 21st overall. That's driven by no top 50 prospects in the organization right now. All of the top prospects have either been promoted over the last couple of years or have regressed a bit in the rankings, but we still do have 4 top 100 prospects, and we have 12 prospects ranked between numbers 101 and 200. So still a lot of good depth in the organization as far as our minor league system, with 16 of the top 200 prospects in baseball. But as I noted, no real blue chip prospects in the organization right now, at least according to the so-called experts. And while our season continues to get off to a really nice start with a 7-1 record through our first 8 games, our former superstar Jake Ortega continuing to have some troubles as he recovers from a broken kneecap that cost him most of last season. Going to be out for at least another month. So Ortega at this point hasn't played since April of 2042. And at this point, or he hasn't played since May of 2042. And at this point, unlikely that he's going to be back in the majors until May of this year in a best case scenario. So seems like moving on from our wrecked superstar when we did was still the right decision, given that he's played in just 140 games over 2+ seasons with the Yankees since we let him move on to greener pastures where he got paid a lot more than we were able to pay him in Oakland. And we've won again to stretch our record to an American League best and a Major League best 8-1. You can see in the very early going, Juan Pimentel, Jonah Richards, Bobby Armstrong, all high on the leaderboards as far as our hitters. And Federico Ariola, as he goes for a 3rd straight Cy Young Award. Dave Baumler, Mike Blumenschein, and Joe Heilman, all among the leaderboards for the pitchers here in the early going. Unfortunately, despite his brilliant start to the season, Jonah Richards' chances at being a repeat MVP winner, have just taken a big hit. Going to be out for 4 weeks with an elbow strain. Off to a brilliant start, hitting .344 with 4 homers and 9 ribbies in our first 8 games of the season. Unfortunately, he's going to be go down for a month now. Will give us an opportunity to get a closer look at the youngster Luis Covarrubias, IAFA signing of ours from several years ago, who's steadily moved up through the organization and is an outstanding defensive catcher prospect, and we think the bat might not be that bad either. Probably not Jonah Richards level, but not too many catchers in the history of baseball who have been as productive as Jonah Richards has been in the early stages of his major league career. And I mentioned Covarrubias going to get a chance to make his major league debut, the 23-year-old IAFA signing of ours in 2037. Only signed him for $450,000. Thought with his outstanding defense, he was a interesting guy to supplement, and the bat has developed reasonably well so far as well. Early stages of this season, hitting just .241 with 1 homer and 29 at-bats in AAA. Was very productive when he made his AAA debut towards the end of last season. Only 52 games at this point above the AA level for Covarrubias, but given his outstanding defense and the fact that at 23 years old, he could be a big part of our future, gonna let him play more often than our backup, Ron Markley, who is 0 for 4, although he does have 3 walks in limited playing time this season. And we continue to play well, running our record to 10-2, but another relatively significant injury. The outstanding young closer, Joe Heilman, going to be out with a sprained ankle for a couple of weeks. As we talked about, leading the American League in saves right now with 7 in his first 8 games, 14 strikeouts in 7 2/3 innings. So he's having a big-time season, but unfortunately going to be laid up for a little while. The only good news, Macho Rangel, our new addition, just 4 days away from being able to hopefully get a rehab start down in AAA, and then bring him up to bolster the major league roster, hopefully within the next week and a half or so. And Macho Rangel about to join the starting rotation. No obvious guy to remove from the rotation, as Arriola, Villarreal, and Blumenshine all pitching well, and their spots definitely not in jeopardy. And Baumler and Comunez, who have been our 4 and 5 starters, are combined 5-0 with 2.35 and 0.75 ERAs. That being said, we're certainly going to move Macho Rangel into the rotation. Both Mike Homer and Jesus Ramos have not been impressive in long relief, but Savion Keys, who we brought up to make his major league debut when Heilman went down a few days ago, has not looked up to the task either. So we will send Mr. Keys down to AAA, and we are actually going to pull Dave Baumler from the rotation, even though he's done well for us. Ernesto Comunez has done even better, and Baumler has lost that captain personality, which had been keeping him in the rotation at many points over the past few seasons. So given that he's older than Comunez and not signed for the long term like Comunez, we'll give Ernesto a few more opportunities to start. When we look at the injured list, we're still a couple weeks away from Weiss potentially being able to come back. So in only 5 days away from Heilman, although he's got more time than that left on the IL at this point. So likely to be making some more pitching decisions over the next few weeks. Hopefully there won't be any more injuries, and we'll be able to be as selective as possible with who ends up on our pitching staff by the time we get towards the end of May. And the first month of the season is in the books, despite the injury issues. Our 19-7 record is the best in baseball, and we've got a 3.5 game lead on the Mariners in the AL West. Bobby Armstrong off to a really nice start this year, and Juan Pimentel also hitting incredibly well this year, our second and third in the league in steals. Armstrong, who we signed to that long extension with the hopes he'd become a big-time center fielder for us, tied for second in the AL in WAR among batters. Arriola and Baumler, who's been moved to the bullpen, tied for the American League lead with 4 wins. And Heilman, who's now back from his injury, tied for second in the league in saves after missing the last couple of weeks. Take a quick look at our team statistics, and our 19-7 record is a couple games better than expectations. We rank first in the American League in runs scored, and you can see we are in the top 5 in all of the major pitching categories. Interestingly, we're first in the league in stolen bases, but dead last in base running in these early stages of the season. Runs allowed, 5th in the American League in runs allowed, so the pitching hasn't been quite as good as it has been in previous years. 4th in defensive efficiency, 2nd in zone rating, so still very good defense. And the hope is with Heilman and Macho Rangel back, and hopefully Doug Weiss not too far away from returning, the pitching will continue to improve as the weeks move along. Check in briefly. Macho Rangel's pitched just a couple of starts for us, and he got pulled early in one of them, so he hasn't been involved in any decisions since he has come back. Heilman with that 1.17 ERA off to an outstanding start. Eric Keech, who's been an all-star for us just 2 seasons ago in 2041, a really good young pitcher, struggling to find playing time for him, unfortunately, this year. 17.18 ERA, but only over 3 2/3 innings, so hopefully we can find some more opportunities for Mr. Keech to get involved. Check in on a couple of the key players. Luis Covarrubias making his major league debut, hitting .271, slightly above a league average offensive player to go with that outstanding defense. So certainly would expect, barring injuries, that he will be our primary backup to Jonah Richards after this season. Ron Markley still our backup for the time being, hitting just a .182 this year, but only 22 at-bats, so can't get too hard on Markley at this point, but hopefully he'll have some decent trade value down the line. Could also be someone, if everyone's healthy and well, that we include in a deal as we get closer to the trade deadline. Mike Homer, we talked about him earlier as a pitcher, still not doing great this year with a 5.65 ERA. Unfortunately, we are so deep that even though we're a month into the season, he hasn't gotten a single at-bat as a utility player for us. Figured that the left-handed hitter off the bench who can play everywhere would find his way into the lineup, but just goes to show you how deep our team is that the youngster can't even find his way onto the field. The interesting thing is our platoon of David Palomares and Phil Swenson. Palomares, who's playing second base for us against right-handed pitching, hitting .222, does have 3 doubles and 3 home runs, but only a 67 WRC plus, so he's been below replacement level. Certainly hasn't been the answer yet. Do like his profile against right-handed pitching and think he could be useful there. So for the time being, we're going to still give him an opportunity. Phil Swenson, who's playing only against left-handed pitching and is our starting shortstop in those circumstances, hitting .265, so the batting average a bit higher, but his WRC plus of 72 is in the exact same range as Mr. Palomares. So neither of those guys is really putting a real strong stranglehold on their opportunities to be platoon players for us at this point. Upgrading at second base, or perhaps finding a first baseman like we did a year ago and pivoting Luis Godina back to second base are both options going forward, but we'll give Palomares and Mr. Swenson a few more weeks likely before we start getting too desperate. as we talked about, Bobby Armstrong, the young center fielder, really did well in the development lab working on his eye this past off season. Only 15 walks through the first month of the year, so not as many as we may have hoped. But he is hitting .333, 3 homers, 12 stolen bases, and a 172 WRC plus. His 1.5 WAR that he's put up through the first month of the season is already more than he did for us all of last year when he did have some injury issues. So good to see Armstrong doing everything in his power to hopefully become a productive everyday center fielder for us. Although he's making $7 million this year, the contract that we signed him to was slightly front-loaded, so those numbers will get even more reasonable going forward if he keeps playing anywhere close to what he's doing for us thus far this season. Will end up being a very nice contract for us here in Oakland. And Mike Ramsey, the brilliant two-way player in the Atlanta Braves organization, off to a good start on the mound with a 4-1 record and a 3.55 ERA. And he just hit 3 home runs a couple of days ago against the Giants in a victory. So Ramsey looks like he could be well on his way to another Cy Young Award / MVP type season with a 4-1 record, 3.55 ERA, and a 1.7 WAR already as a pitcher. And all he's doing as a batter this year is hitting .410 with 11 home runs and 26 ribbies in his first 100 at-bats, and a 2.5 WAR as a position player. So Ramsey Sadique, one of the most decorated players in the history of baseball, with those 4 Cy Young Awards and 7 Most Valuable Player Awards, is going to be making a strong case to add to his hardware this coming season if he can remain healthy. And we continue rolling along, pushing our record to 24-7 as we sit here on May 6th. The lead in the division is up to 8, as we're 9-1 over our last 10, and the Mariners are 1-9 over their last 10. Doug Weiss ready to begin a rehab assignment. Unfortunately, Jonah Richards' return from that elbow strain is still unknown. Ernesto Comunez injured with a diagnosis pending. He's been really good for us in the rotation this year. Hopefully it's not too serious, but if it is a more significant issue, at least it appears that we are not too far from Weiss being back, although given that he's been out for a couple of months, we're going to give him certainly at least 1 start and possibly 2 in AAA before we bring him up to the big club. And our pitching depth will definitely be challenged, as Comunez appears to be done for the year. Going to be out for 7 to 8 months with bone chips in his elbow. Feel real bad. This is an international free agent signing from about 8.5 years ago at this point, who has become a useful major leaguer for us. He's been in and out of the rotation basically ever since he joined us. He's started games for us now for 5 consecutive seasons, but until this year, he had never been a regular member of the rotation, and he had done an outstanding job for us. 4-0 record with a 1.80 ERA, almost a win above replacement over those first 6 starts of the season. But unfortunately, Comunez has always been fragile and has had time on the IL more often than not. He spent time on the IL at some point during each of his major league seasons, and this season is going to end for Dozer Comunez early. Hopefully we'll have Weiss back in the not-too-distant future, but certainly, although Comunez was not necessarily expected to be in our starting rotation when the season got underway, he had seized that opportunity and was certainly going to be an important part of our bullpen and a guy to fall back on if we had some injury issues in the rotation. Unfortunately, the injury issues now involve him, and he will not be around to give us depth in the pitching staff for the remainder of this season. And the news, unfortunately, keeps getting worse. Doug Weiss pitched just 2/3 of an innings in his first rehab start, and he has a torn triceps. He is out for 4 months, so hopefully we get him back in September before the playoffs, but he is wrecked physically. You may remember we signed him to that very front-loaded extension this past off season. Liked his ceiling if he was healthy, but the health has often been the issue with Mr. Weiss, and they're paying him $24 million this year to likely have no more than 3 or 4 starts for us at the major league level if everything goes well is certainly a big and unfortunate investment for our Oakland A's. So Weiss not officially done for the year, but he will not be supplementing the loss of Mr. Camunez in the rotation, unfortunately. And with Camunez gone for the year and Weiss not coming back to save us at any time, we're going to move Mr. Baumler back into the 5th spot in the rotation. So with Arriola, Villarreal, Blumenshine, Rangel, and Baumler as our top 5 starters, still like our rotation very much right now. The issue is that the depth behind those guys is not what it has been. Fortunately, Mike Homer has been pitching better of late. He could certainly be a 5th starter for us in a pinch. We've also promoted Jesus Berlanga, IAFA signing from 2037. He was a guy who we signed for $950,000 that year when we had a larger class than normal. Berlanga, very productive in AAA for us this year, has not allowed an earned run over 12 innings pitched, and certainly has a profile that indicates he could be a very useful arm out of our bullpen. So the soon-to-be 23-year-old is hopefully going to get to make his major league debut for us in the coming days. And our A's continue to roll along, pushing our record to 28-8. Unfortunately, Jonah Richards, unknown return from that elbow strain. So we're hoping that he would be back by about now, but hopefully it's not something that's going to become more significant. His arm is a big part of his strength as a catcher defensively, and he's also obviously a critical offensive player to have in our lineup. Certainly haven't missed him yet with a 28-8 record, and Covarrubias playing pretty well, but all things being equal, would certainly prefer to have that outstanding left-handed bat in the lineup about 3 out of every 4 games for us. And the injury issues continue to plague the franchise, Jake Ortega, so it's not just our team dealing with injuries. Bruised wrist that has kept him off the field since the 9th. Did rehab 4 games in Scranton before he got injured, and he was very productive at the AAA level. Not surprising for a 2-time MVP and one of the top players in baseball when he's healthy. But at 35, counting down to 36 years old and wrecked physically, definitely seems like Ortega's chance to ultimately put up enough counting stats to be in the discussion for the Hall of Fame. His odds of doing that are getting lower and lower each year. He had those 2 MVP awards with us the years that he led the league in WAR, also led the league in doubles once and stolen bases a couple times with us. But his career WAR only 56.8, and as I said, he's closing in on 36 years old. Doesn't even have 1,500 career hits. Doesn't have 200 home runs left. Barely 5,000 at-bats at this point, and it seems like the injury issues are going to affect Jake Ortega similarly in his Hall of Fame quest, similar to some other New York players, whether you're a fan of the Mets with David Wright or a fan of the Yankees like I am with Don Mattingly, certainly players who seem to be potentially on a Hall of Fame trajectory that unfortunately the injuries shortened their careers and limited their effectiveness at times. And Jake Ortega, the franchise, unfortunately may be following a somewhat similar path. And positively, Jonah Richards is healthy and well, so we've sent Covarrubias back down to AAA so he can play every day. And the hope is that Richards will get right back to hitting the way that he hit over the first week and a half of the season before he ended up on the IL for over a month. And unfortunately, our dream of perhaps having Steve Genis supplement our pitching staff this year is over. He has signed a 4-year extension with the Rangers. Not quite what he was making before. He had that 6-year, $333 million deal. Only 4 years and $118 million, so a little less than $30 million a year for these next 4 years of his career. But they are no longer shopping him, as they have the outstanding pitcher who won 7 consecutive AL Cy Young Awards from 2034 to 2040 locked up for, can't say the remainder of his career, but certainly what will likely be the majority of his future. 4-1 record with a 2.07 ERA for the Rangers this year, so he continues to be one of the top pitchers in baseball. And we've got another injury that we'll be talking about shortly, but one of the top pitchers in baseball, Andy Grimes from the Washington Nationals, his season has come to an end. Going to be out about 5 months with a ruptured Achilles tendon while he was chasing his dog down the street. Grimes, who has won 3 consecutive NL Cy Young Awards, is going to finish up this season 4-3 with a 2.96 ERA, and clearly will not be running his Cy Young Award streak to 4 in a row. We also have another injury. It once again involves our starting rotation. Mike Blumenshine with a dead arm, just 1 pitch today in his start, and we ended up losing to Detroit 6-7. 7-1 with a 1.44 ERA this year, so he has been fantastic for us in the 11 games that he has pitched. But unfortunately, he's going to need to be shut down for the next couple of weeks. And with that injury to Blumenshine, we're going to give Mike Homer, who's been pitching a bit better of late, has his ERA down to 4.91, an opportunity to start a few games for us over the next couple of weeks. Still think it may be time for us to consider investigating the trade market. Even though Genis is not available, there are some interesting options there. But at this point, with a 40-14 record, even though we're not playing as well recently, certainly not in a position where we need to panic or do anything desperate. And as I mentioned, as the calendar turns to June, our record is 40-14, so we have a 10-game lead over the Los Angeles Angels in the American League West. That 40-14 record puts us ahead of the Detroit Tigers by 4 games for the best record in baseball. They're 34-16 at this point. Luis Godina having a big year. Second in the American League batting race, second in OPS, and second in batter WAR. Juan Ramirez, the designated hitter, leading the league in ribbies. Bobby Armstrong leading the league in steals and leading the league in batter WAR. Juan Ramirez had a 13-game hitting streak earlier. Pitching-wise, the youngster Luis Villarreal, 6-3 with a 2.05 ERA, which is second in the league. Arriola and Blumenshine 1-2 in the league in wins. Arriola, as we've talked about, has led the American League in wins for 2 straight seasons with 19 each year, while winning back-to-back American League Cy Young Awards. And with that 8-1 record, 2.97 ERA, and 73 strikeouts as we sit here on June 1st, seems like he is making a case to receive some Cy Young Award votes this year as well. And before we finish things up, we'll take a look at the team statistics. After a 19-7 April, 21-7 in May, despite the injuries, we remain first in the American League in runs scored And you can see we are in the top 2 in the American League in every primary offensive category. Continue to be a very poor base running team by the metrics, even though we do lead the league in stolen bases. Pitching has continued to improve, now 3rd in the American League in runs allowed. Starters ERA a brilliant 2.59, although our bullpen has been middle of the pack so far. 1st in the league in defensive efficiency and 1st in zone rating, so another really good season thus far for our Oakland Athletics. And even with Steve Genius off the trade block, there is a pitcher that is on the block that we have been looking at in recent weeks. And that pitcher is Alejandro Espinoza, the brilliant left-hander from the Kansas City Royals, 4-3 with a 4.29 ERA this year. But the 25-year-old has already been an all-star once back in 2039, making a ton of money this year, $35 million, and he's set to become a free agent. So it would be a pure rental and a very expensive rental. He's also a guy who's fragile physically, and he's coming off a year in 2042 when he started only 4 games. Clearly, in a perfect world, we'd love for someone a little bit durable to be what we could add on the trade market. Espinoza also will certainly not be cheap. You can see there's nobody on the team who makes this work now. We can get a little bit of traction with Doug Weiss, believe it or not. When we include Weiss in the deal, if we add Weiss, who's out for most of this year, and then one of the top players on our team, we can get the deal done. The positive from that is we'd get Weiss's big price tag for this year when he's going to be injured for another 3 months off the books, and replace him with Espinoza, who is at least healthy right now. Negatively, we are potentially losing those bargain years at $15 million for the next couple seasons for Mr. Weiss. But given that he's now wrecked physically, it might not be the worst thing for us to think about a way to get Weiss off the books. Definitely going to be an expensive trade to get it done. Certainly don't see us giving up one of the key players in our organization in addition to Weiss to just rent Espinoza for the next 4 months. So I don't know that he's a perfect solution, but if the Worldwide Scouting Department has thoughts, would certainly love to hear them. As we think about other pitchers who are on the trade block at this point, Espinoza certainly stands out as the top guy available. Another starter, Esteban Narvaez. The positives from him is that he's normal as far as his injury proneness, and a pretty proven major league starter, 5-3 with a 3.32 ERA this year. The 33-year-old lefty is a 3-time All-Star, making about $19.4 million, or exactly $19.4 million this year, and he's got a player option for next season. His stuff is pretty filthy, with a great slider and a very good fastball to go with a good changeup and a curve. Movement on his pitches is fine, but he is going to walk more batters than we would find ideal. Positively, Narvaez, the price tag is much lower, and there's a fair number of options we could consider bringing him on board. Blumenshine we could trade away, but as we've talked about, he's only out 2 weeks, and Mr. Blumenshine is still signed to a very reasonable contract, so I don't think we would trade him for Narvaez. But if we are just looking for organizational depth and someone who could be a good solid 4th or 5th starter for us for this year and likely take the ball another 21, 22 times in starts for us, Narvaez probably feel a little better that he'll be out there every day, given that he's not as injury prone as Espinoza. But certainly if we're looking to make a big splash, Espinoza is a name to consider. couple other starters on the list, but unfortunately they're hurt. Alan Hunsaker, who was with us briefly years ago, out with a sprained hammy. Jeremy Seabright out for a year with a torn rotator cuff. So I don't think that either of those guys is a realistic option for us to pursue. And with West, Watler, and Velasco, some more replacement level type guys who could give us some depth, but certainly nobody that we need to, I think, get very aggressive about pursuing quite yet, given that we are, as we talked about, already 10 games up in the division despite some pretty significant injury issues this year. And with that, we will call it a season. Next time around, we will do our full mid-season review when we get to the midway point. Going to continue thinking about whether there's a need to add a starting pitcher in trade, given some of the injury issues that we're dealing with at this point. Even though it would be a pure rental to bring on Mr. Espinoza, and even though Weiss, in theory, will be available for us in the playoffs, given that he does help get that trade done, and he is now wrecked physically, I don't hate including Weiss in a deal to rent Espinoza. My concern is that the price tag right now on top of Weiss just seems very high for, as I talked about earlier, 4-month rental. But we'll continue to think about those things going forward. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.